What's going on, everyone? So this may be Jimmy Butler's last season with the Miami Heat. He is expected to go and test free agency. And if Miami isn't that good, I mean, the last 2 years, they've been a play-in team. Yes, they went to the finals 2 years ago, but still, like, do you really want to be a play-in team year in and year out? Do you want to run the risk of losing Jimmy Butler for nothing if he ends up going to another team? Or if you're Miami, do you look to try to trade him? Look to potentially move him. Team like the Brooklyn Nets is rumored and reported to be very interested in Jimmy Butler, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. You just traded Mikal Bridges, so why would you want to go and bring in Jimmy Butler? Also, I think, Jimmy Butler isn't a piece or a player that can just be plug and play anywhere. I like Jimmy a lot, right? But regular season Jimmy and playoff Jimmy are two very different guys. Also, he has a little bit of a history, right? Especially on young teams with young players and stuff like that. So some of these young teams, they might not be interested, right? Like, there's a lot of pros and cons with Jimmy Butler. And, he at his age is going to want to win. How many teams are willing to sell the farm and unload to go get a guy like a Jimmy Butler and also be able to maintain contention and be a contender or, at least a team in the potential conversation, right? The Knicks are a team that I think makes a lot of sense. You could turn Julius Randle into a Jimmy Butler. That could be very interesting. And now you have, a Brunson, Bridges, Butler, OG, and Mitchell Robinson lineup, which would be, that would be absolutely tough. But we'll see. We'll see how the Jimmy Butler to one of these teams play out. Does he stay in Miami? Right now, it's like he wants to test free agency. That doesn't mean he will, right? Miami may be able to convince him to stay. Is he really going to turn down $52 million, which he can opt in as a player option? Now, he may look and go, well, at my age, he'll be 35 this year, right? I'd rather get, a 3-year, $120 million deal, right? So that way I have more guaranteed money long-term rather than let me get $52 million. And now either no one wants to sign me or people only want to sign me for $15 million, right? You may be able to just get more money long-term if he goes the route of entering free agency. A team may end up putting money on him. But one team in particular that I want to talk about and kind of just explore the idea, because I actually don't hate the idea. Originally, I had the idea pop in my head. I was doing a video breaking down Jimmy Butler, popped in my head, and I was kind of But the more that I think about it, the more I like it. And that is the San Antonio Spurs, right? Now, San Antonio is a very young team. They have a bunch of young players and young talent. Now, again, Jimmy Butler has a history with some young teams not really getting along. However, his problem was the work ethic of guys like Karl Anthony Towns and Andrew Wiggins and guys like that, right? Where Victor Wembanyama, his work ethic is A1. You see that. Stephon Castle seems like a guy that his work ethic is A1. Devin Vassell, right? All these. Keldon Johnson just lost 33 pounds, right? Jimmy Butler also could just slot in perfectly and give you that proven guy, give you that experience. I think Jimmy Butler would be good for the young guys that you have on this road. I think Jimmy Butler would do wonders for guys like Stephon Castle. Stephon Castle reminds me a lot of Jimmy Butler. Just that dirty work, will do everything. I don't care if I'm a star or not. I'm going to sacrifice my body. I'm going to do the hustle plays and work. I just think he would go a long way. And the Spurs have been open to these older guys, right? And historically speaking, the older guys are the ones that usually win the championships, right? The young teams are usually the teams that need to gain the experience to kind of go through the ins and outs, where I think Jimmy Butler would slot in perfectly with the Spurs, and you could have a starting five of Chris Paul, Devin Vassell, Jimmy Butler, Harrison Barnes, and Victor Wembanyama. Sounds pretty good to me, right? You got some good versatility out on the perimeter with Harrison Barnes and Jimmy Butler. You got that perimeter defense. You got Devin Vassell who could just go get buckets. Again, Jimmy Butler's a guy that, yes, he can take over at any moment, at any stretch, at any point during the game, but he's also willing, if Devin Vassell is cooking and Wemby's doing his thing, Jimmy will just go out there and just get steals and play defense and rebound and just do the dirty work, right? So I do think Jimmy Butler makes a lot of sense, right? There is a concern of like lack of shooting and stuff like that from Jimmy. Like he's not really this great 3-point shooter, but he's a guy that I do think him with Wemby, with Chris Paul, and then Harrison Barnes, right? Devin Vassell definitely, but he's still very young, right? He's still kind of coming into his own. But I like the idea of like, let's see if we can squeeze out a chip, right? Like Jimmy Butler's done more with less. I mean, he has. And yes, you could argue, well, that's the Eastern Conference, but still, like, I also think he'd have more, I just think he'd have a better overall team. Right? I think Victor Wembanyama, if he can kind of start taking those strides, and I think there was a genuine argument last season that Victor was a top, 15 player in the league. If he can move into the top 10 conversation, right? And then, look, I like Bam, but Victor Wembanyama is better than Bam, right? Like, I like Victor Wembanyama and like his upside and just his potential and stuff. And he if he can start coming into his own, like, imagine what Jimmy and Wemby could do together. And then you add in Chris Paul, who has been in the finals and has playoff experience and can be the guy that kind of glues it all together. And, he's a guy that, him and Jimmy could kind of be the vet leaders. Also, Greg Popovich is a guy that Jimmy Butler, he's going to respect. He's not going to be the Jimmy that he can be at times, right? The a-hole, right? I really do like the idea of Jimmy Butler in a Spurs uniform, adding to that kind of veteranness and veteran leadership of that team, right? You're not signing him to a 4 or 5 year deal, right? And the luxury is because Wemby is so cheap, right? Like, you can get away with going and bringing in a guy like a Jimmy Butler, right? You can get away with bringing somebody like that in and still be able to build and round out a contender. Right? Because Jimmy Butler, like, yeah, even if you're paying him, $40 million a year, Wemby is so young, you can kind of have Jimmy's contract line up and expire and kind of have all the kind of the old guys, so to speak, kind of fall off once you have to start paying Wemby. Also, Harrison Barnes would be an expiring contract next year, so you could look to even move him to maybe go get another starter pair alongside Butler and Wemby and stuff. Right? Again, I don't hate the idea. You're looking at a package centered around Zach Collins and Keldon Johnson for Jimmy. Like, I don't think that that's a bad move at all. Right? Like, I would rather, this is just me personally, maybe you feel otherwise, I'd rather have Jimmy Butler than Keldon Johnson. Right? Like, I think Jimmy Butler will do more. I think he fits better. Right? Where you have Vassell and Castle. I was going to combine those two. You have things like that. And then now, because you have that wave of, Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes, and I understand, look, this year is a development year, right? This year is supposed to be a growth year and kind of, helping the young guys grow along and develop. But if come the trade deadline, you're in that conversation for play-in and you're actually better than expected, right? Like, and Wemby is really making these strides and stuff. I don't hate the idea of just kind of making a splash, right? Because Butler is a guy that I do think solves both things. Like, I do think Jimmy Butler is a guy that can help develop with the young guys, so it still fits with the development. And I also think Jimmy is a guy that can help you win now. And I've talked about this before. Like, if the Spurs can squeeze out a championship before Victor really starts to hit his stride and you have to pay him heavily, right? Like, because he's going to get paid pretty, before you know it, you're going to look up one day and all of a sudden it's like, oh, we're paying him $60 million a year, right? Like, if I'm the Spurs and I can squeeze out a championship in that time and kind of give Victor a head start, why wouldn't you? Again, Chris Paul, Devin Vassell, Jimmy Butler, Harrison Barnes, and Victor Wembanyama with Stephon Castle off the bench. Like, I don't hate that at all, right? Like, regular season, I'm not going to lie, I have my questions, right? Because Chris Paul, 1, can he stay healthy? 2, Jimmy Butler in the regular season kind of can not only be lackluster, but almost like he doesn't care at times during the regular season, right? During the regular season, it's almost like he just wants to kind of get to the playoffs. But if they can get to the playoffs and at least, squeeze in as the 6th seed, I would not want to play a team with Chris Paul, Jimmy Butler, and Victor Wembanyama. Like, I would not. Playoff Jimmy is a real thing. Chris Paul is a guy that, I know that there've been questions about him in the playoffs in the past, but it's a guy that he's not going to play the same role he had to play in the past, where he had to be the number 1 or number 2 option. No, he's looked at just to be the playmaker and put everything together and, still go get a steal or 2 a game and, he basically be a supercharged role guy as opposed to like a real, we need you to be a star, right? So I don't know. I don't like Jimmy and Wemby are a very interesting pairing in my opinion. Like I really do. Like I think it has the potential to be tough, where you're just like, man, like how do you like playing the Spurs? I don't. You got Jimmy out on the perimeter and you got Wemby on the interior, and it's just menacing, right? Like I do. I mean, again, regular season, I have my questions. Regular season, I am a little like, I don't know how that would look, but man, if they get to the playoffs and you have Jimmy and Wemby in the playoffs, and I don't care who you are, you do not want to play those guys in the playoffs. You do not. Right? You do not want to have to match up against these guys with Chris Paul and Harrison Barnes, right? 2 guys that have kind of been there, done that. And then you add in Jimmy, but I don't know. But anyway, as always, this is a discussion. Pass a question on you. Let me know your thoughts and opinions down in the comments below. What do you think? How do you feel? What are your thoughts? Do you think that Jimmy Butler makes sense for the San Antonio Spurs? Do you think that, no, Victor Wembanyama, wouldn't be a great pairing with Jimmy? Jimmy has a bad history with the young guys, too old. However you feel, whatever your thoughts are, I'd love to hear it. So let me know down in the comments below. That being said, if you haven't liked this video, hit that like button. Helps me a lot. So we enjoy these types of videos. Truly appreciate it. Not subscribe channel, hit that subscribe button. Turn on the bell notifications. Appreciate y'all. See you in the next one. Thank you.